and School Board Curriculum Committee. It is 4:32 p.m. and today is March 19th of 2024. We will start with introductions. I am Melanie Ergat, School Board Member.
June Kruger, School Board Member.
Kelly Lang, School Board Member.
Quinn Trueblood, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Erin Faust, Program Administrator.
Tina Van Roo, District Data and Assessment Coordinator.
Heather Isaacson, Program Administrator.
Kelly Downs, Curriculum Coordinator.
All right, thank you, everybody. It's nice to have an audience today. We don't usually get one for Curriculum Committee. But our first item up for presentation and discussion was prepared by Heather Isaacson, and it is the Act 20 Early Literacy Law Updates and Primary Resource Selection Recommendations.
Thank you, Melanie. And I would like to, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yes, before Ms. Isaacson starts, I really want to say that I'm not an excessive person, but I do believe this moment requires it. So if you'll give me a little bit of time to be excessive. So this presentation before you today really represents a very significant lift by our literacy specialists who are with you tonight, our elementary principals who are also with you, and our program administrator to lead our district through a historic time under this law. This team has met weekly since the fall of 2023 to apply their collective expertise with due diligence to arrive at these recommendations that are presented to you tonight for primary instructional resources for English language arts for students from kindergarten through the 4th grade. So I want to extend my greatest appreciation and respect for each member of this team, and I wish to recognize each member by name. So if you are in the audience, please wave so that our board members can see you and recognize you. Starting with our literacy specialists, we have Corinne Ties. And I really can't see you, so I'm just gonna go. Jackie Wiedmeyer, Mary Ellen Sosha, Bridget Walter, and Rebecca Miner, who isn't able to be with us tonight.
No, she's here.
We also, oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, we also have our elementary principals. We have Andy Kasich, and you know them more, Tristan Hayes, Adrian Schneider, who, if she's not here, will be coming shortly, Nathan Politz, and Darcy Van Destine, who isn't here tonight with us, but they've been a huge part of the team. I also want to recognize our superintendent, Dr. Wimmer, who is also here with us tonight. She has been an exceptionally supportive leader. She understands the depth of work that we have been doing, and she does support us in every way possible, and that allows us to get to this moment tonight. So thank you. And lastly, we have our program administrator, Heather, standing with you right now, and she has led this team. And it has been a very focused team, and it's been a collaborative team, and they are learning and leading together. So it was with my sincerest thanks to each of you for your leadership. And now, Heather, if you can kick off the presentation. We also invite every board member to ask questions and to encourage team members right there sitting in before you to provide any answers or insights that they have with the expertise that they bring with them. So thank you for that. And Heather, take it away.
Okay, so tonight we are discussing the Act 20 Early Literacy Law, updates and primary resource selection recommendations. And this is, oops, is my microphone not on? Oops, sorry, thank you. Okay, can you hear? Okay. David, and myself, our literacy specialist team, which were our literacy specialists here before you, and myself as well. And then the literacy specialist team combined with our district literacy, or with our principals, make up our district literacy team. So progress update, we did conduct professional development around Act 20, the early literacy law overview, with our staff. And that was a what the science of reading is and what it is not, to give them an understanding of what was included in the law. And then we also talked about a primary resource adoption, or had a primary resource adoption informational session. And that was to give them access to the DPI Early Literacy Curriculum Review Tool, which is what we used as a literacy specialist team to review all of the materials. We also have started a mandated training session. There are 2 mandated trainings under the law, one for leadership and then one for our teachers. And the Pathways to Literacy Leadership has already been underway with our elementary principals, our literacy specialists, and other key leaders. And that is through the AIM Institute for Learning and Research. And then shortly, Pathways to Proficient Reading coming up in the fall will begin for our EL teachers, our special education teachers, and our intervention teachers, followed by the K-4 classroom teachers in 2025. So the first step in the process was to conduct a program evaluation. That program evaluation revealed that under the Act 20 literacy law, it initiated the urgency for a K-12 ELA program evaluation, which determined that the K-4 primary resource that is currently in use does not meet the requirements outlined in Act 20 in the following ways. There is no explicit and systematic phonological components, such as phonemic awareness and phonics, and there is an embedded 3-cueing system, which is not permissible under the law in the current resource. So our primary resource selection process, we took a multiple reference approach. So we reviewed EdReports, which is a respected online source that does thorough research on current primary resources and curriculum for English language arts. We reviewed white papers, peer reviews, looked at ESSA guidelines, and consulted CESA 6. We also had an analysis. The literacy specialist team used the DPI's Early Literacy Council rubric, and the criteria aligned to the science of reading. And it is embedded within this as well. The areas reviewed include general look-fors, comprehension, building background knowledge, vocabulary, oral language, phonological awareness, which includes phonemic awareness and phonics, spelling, writing, and fluency. So as you can see, that's an exhaustive list of what was reviewed using that rubric. The vetted curricular resources that we chose initially were Savas, MyView, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Into Reading, McGraw-Hill, Wonders, Benchmark Advance, Witten Wisdom with Really Great Reading, Witten Wisdom with UFly, and Amplify CKLA. The resources selected and presented to staff for further review and input. So we reviewed all of those on the left using the DPI tool, and then we pared it down to Witten Wisdom with Really Great Reading, Witten Wisdom with UFly, Amplify CKLA. Really Great Reading and UFly are foundational programs that are paired with Witten Wisdom, which is the knowledge building piece, and those are interchangeable. with Wit and Wisdom. The bolded resources are eligible for grant reimbursement up to 50%. So Wit and Wisdom with Really Great Reading and Amplify CKLA will be eligible for possible reimbursement through the state. So we are 120 plus staff strong, which includes our teachers, special education teachers, English language arts teachers, English language teachers, our EL teachers, speech and language teachers, reading and math interventionists, literacy specialists, principals, our C&I program administrator, and our C&I director. Through the consultative process, we conducted question and answer roundtable discussions at each of the buildings, the elementary buildings, for staff level meetings. In those, they had the opportunity to ask questions and talk about what was happening in the process as we were moving along. There were also vendor presentations, so both vendors from Wit and Wisdom and Really Great Reading, as well as Amplify CKLA, came to our not this past PD day, but the one prior in February, and gave presentations to our staff on those resources. There was also then a staff preview of potential primary resources at each building. Each one of the literacy specialists and principals presented to the staff, asked and had answered question and answer sessions as well. They were able to interact with the materials and have a significant amount of time with them. And then we also gave them a staff survey for their recommendations. I do want to go backward, actually. I'm just going to come back to the vetted curricular resources. And just let you know that the 3 resources that were brought forward to the staff for review scored the highest in our vetting process. So that is why we brought those forward. All of the comprehensive resources vetted by our teams were also brought to the legislature for recommendation by the Early Literacy Curriculum Council, with the exception of Wit and Wisdom with UFly. And the reason for that is that was not one of the resources that was brought forth to the Early Literacy Council. It wasn't presented that way. It was only presented with the Really Great Reading. However, because UFly is used in some of our schools as a supplemental resource and for intervention, we vetted that resource as well, and it scored highest with Wit and Wisdom. So it scored higher than Really Great Reading with Wit and Wisdom. So we brought that forward to our staff as well to give them the opportunity to review that. So our staff input, the results of the primary resource teacher consultation survey, with 79% overall response rate, which I was really excited about. We had 87 total respondents. Our classroom teachers, special education teachers, EL teachers, speech and language pathologists, and math and reading interventionists all participated in the survey. So the survey results are next, and these were our school sites. So each one of our elementary schools, and you can see that there was a pretty even split between all of the schools that participated. And grade level representation. So a really nice split between the grade levels as well, with kindergarten grade 1 and 2, all about 17%, grade 3 and 4, approximately 16%, and then our special education, EL, intervention, and speech and language rounded out the rest. The next question was what resource they felt would be most engaging for their students as a whole, and 57.5% chose Amplify CKLA, while approximately 20% were split between Wit and Wisdom with Really Great Reading and Wit and Wisdom with UFly. And for easiest to implement, again, Amplify CKLA was the clear choice with approximately 71%, and then Wit and Wisdom next with UFly at 16%, and then Wit and Wisdom with Really Great Reading at 12%. It's important to note that the district literacy team found that each of these options met the criteria under the law and that they would be a good fit for our students and district as a whole. The team then empowered the teaching staff to voice their opinions in spirit of the consultative process to choose what they felt was best for their students overall. The blue section represents the first choice of the teachers with 64% choosing Amplify CKLA. Also is included the teacher primary resource comments in the blue section as well. And as we move on to the next, some of the comments then were summarized with concerns and challenges and solutions. So first, a few wit and wisdom anchor text may not align with the school board policy thresholds for obscene language, graphic violence, and sexual content. The solution, this was anticipated and remedied by replacement with alternate text and lessons. So when that goes out for staff and public, or for public viewing, those replacement texts will be available. B, some staff concern regarding developmental and cultural appropriateness with Amplify CKLA. The solution, Amplify CKLA provided their curricular rationale, a social justice guide, and simple lesson modifications. Next, one of the three potential resource options is not reimbursable by the state. However, we are offering two that are reimbursable along with a cost analysis of all three. And lastly, time constraints on resource adoption for fall of 24-25 implementation is a challenge. However, continued monitoring of timelines with transparent and concise communication is one of our solutions. So our preliminary cost analysis is next. The first one was really great reading with wit and wisdom, and it's this is a comprehensive program. So great minds, wit and wisdom, really great reading, and GEOs are all separate programs, but together they make up a comprehensive program with the foundational skills, with the knowledge building, and with the quotable readers. And so on that first line, the total cost estimate for 1 year with professional development is $632,975. Next is Great Minds, Wit and Wisdom Comprehensive for 6 years with 1 year of professional development at $947,033. Third, in the pink, Wit and Wisdom as a comprehensive program with UFly and GEOs, so that would create it as a comprehensive program with 1 year of professional development at $492,689. However, that one is not reimbursable by the state. In the blue, Amplify CKLA Comprehensive program, and so that is everything is included in one package rather than having it separated out. It's just one full package, and that also includes 1 year of Boost Reading, which is a digital tool for intervention, and that would be free for 1 year. The 3-year cost estimate is $444,836, and then lastly, the same comprehensive curriculum with 1 year of Boost Reading for 6 years is $621,700. I just want to make sure that, so the ones that are starred, I just want to make sure that I highlight that as well. So the starred programs are the ones that are reimbursable by the state for up to 50%. However, I was just on a call today, and the state did give updated information that has indicated not to expect anything close to the 50% amount. So that was new information as of today. We had anticipated that a while ago, but they confirmed that today. So the next step is to a request to bring forward the potential primary resources to to all interested parties for public viewing and feedback.
Would all of 3 of the resources be coming forward for public feedback? Is that?
I think that that's something that we would, could be under consideration for the curriculum committee. We, as a district literacy team, engage the teachers in the consultative process. And because we brought forward 3 resources that we felt would be good for our students, and all 3 of them are very comparable. There's just maybe slight differences between each one of them. We are comfortable going with what the teachers have chosen.
Yeah, that was my next question. It seemed like the Amplify CKLA was kind of standing out amongst the teachers and
Yep.
staff.
Yep.
And even price-wise, compared to some of the other ones, it's seems to be better on the budget.
So the process timeline would be, today is our recommendation to move forward to public viewing. Next, we would look to a timeline of between April 1st and April 12th in there for public viewing and survey for all interested parties at both the ESC and the public library. Next, the curriculum committee, we would bring it back to the curriculum committee to share the community results and ask for a recommendation to move forward to the school board for discussion. Hopefully moving to the school board on the 22nd of April for a primary resource discussion. And May 6th, we would hope for a primary resource approval in order to be able to purchase by the next fiscal year, July 1st, and looking for primary resource purchase and distribution in July and August. What
I'd like to
questions?
could I just clarify one step?
Yes.
So, should the committee today, make a motion to move the curriculum for public viewing, what would happen after that, after, the department collects the survey results and presents it back to the committee? What would happen is the committee would then, review all of the data, all of the recommendations, and bring forth a recommendation to the board for further discussion. So it wouldn't be that the committee would go out and put all 3 out there. The committee would render a recommendation for the board for discussion. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions, and I
Yeah.
thank you for this presentation. The format, I'm assuming, is online for students to interact at a computer with potentially individualized learning. Is that a true statement?
So it is a hybrid. So there are some online components for each of the resources, but the majority of it is direct teacher instruction. They have some online components that they can teach with, but there's also paper, pencil. There are workbooks. There's a lot of writing for each of the resources. So it's a hybrid approach.
You talk about the survey results, but I'm curious to see how many people participated in the roundtables at each building. Was it a good participation?
Yep, it took place either during a staff meeting or a PLC at each one of the buildings. So all staff were required to come.
Okay, so I'm just looking through the comments of all of these. So everyone's pretty much had time to look at this. Like, you have input from a very good sampling of the teachers and anyone involved that will be using this.
Yes.
Okay.
They had over 2 weeks to engage with materials, and then they had the presentation as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I remember last month when you were presenting with the number of children coming into the district who are not English as a primary language.
Yes.
So I'm curious if this program offers not only English but other languages that would help those children as well.
CKLA for sure does. It has a companion program that is geared towards Spanish-speaking students. So that's something that Michelle Garcia and I have had a conversation about. And I've also put a request out to CKLA to get some of sample materials in so that we can start looking through those together. And then each one of the programs offers EL recommendations for teachers. So within the teacher manual, and it offers what the EL solutions are. And the science of reading is really geared more toward, and teaching is really geared more toward the needs of EL students due to the structured literacy, the heightened use of vocabulary, and the mapping of the words and the use of phonics. It is the best practice for EL students as well.
All right, does anybody have any other comments or questions? I do. Okay, June does.
In the presentation early on, you mentioned 3 queuing, and it's not permissible. And could you explain a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So that's the MSV. It's either called 3 queuing or MSV. So that is having students attend to meaning, syntax, and visual cues versus using phonics in order to try to determine how to read the words. So if they're reading a passage and they come across a tricky word or a word they don't understand, 3 queuing or MSV would have them determine whether they thought that made sense in the text first, or whether or not, or they would have them use a picture clue, or they would have them skip it altogether and move to the end, rather than looking at the word itself and trying to figure out how to sound out the word using the structured literacy, using their phonemic awareness and phonics instruction. Yep.
Are there any more questions? Because I just can't see.
No, I don't think there's any more questions.
So at this point, I just wanted to clarify what I had stated before to the members, that there would be a motion making, and there isn't one. So what we'd be asking for is that we would have a green light from the committee to move the materials for public viewing as our procedure requires.
Yes,
We just need you to say yes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I can make a motion if that's what you would like, Quinn.
That's okay. We don't have to make a motion.
Okay, okay, I think- Are we good?
So let's do what we've done before, which is have the committee makes a statement about, yes, let's move that out and move on with our process. So you can come back so we can come back to you with the feedback from the community.
Yes, that sounds good. I think we are all in favor of moving it forward for public viewing at the library and the Education Service Center. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify, would that be moving forward all 3 resources or 1 resource?
I think just the one that really stood out through all the staff, and I think that would be the best option. Yeah. Rather than dragging it all over there, if we kind of have already settled on that being the primary resource that everybody wants, I'm good with that. Just the Amplify CKLA.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hey team, that's a good yes for us. Yay, I'm so happy for us.
Tina, do you want me to stay up here? Okay.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you, Heather. And then it looks like we'll move on to our next item, which is the proposed recommendations for book club procedures and processes. And you are dismissed to leave if you would like to go.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Thank you.
Do you want to come up and do it? Thanks.
Okay. So for the next agenda item, this is our second discussion, and I just wanted to remind the members that we had some proposed recommendations from the staff survey and the parent guardian survey. And this is just a continuance of it. I think the few things that are highlighted from last meeting's discussion was some contemplation about what the permission slips, how to operate them. I wanted to give you a follow-up to say that should you consider having parents up front, especially for the high schools, say they do want or don't want to sign permission on it. We do have a tool at the beginning of the year, as you all know as parents, to put that as part of the registration process. So that just gives you a clear solution there.
Yeah, I think that that we're all in agreement with being able to have that option for parents that maybe don't want to have to mess with the permission slips all throughout the year. So
Yeah, I like that it's one time you can have that attached to your child.
Are we offering that, just to clarify, to the high school only or the 5 through 12?
I wonder if would we be showing them any of the book lists prior to them signing off on that?
So what I would recommend is, as we've done so much of the trench work, and as you also see in other policy language from other districts, it is very reasonable to have the expectation that the lists are given to families, whether by year or by quarters or by semesters. We operationally will regulate that, but they should know it's still informational. They just may not want to give permission. So we would still give that to parents. They just don't have to return it back. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. Then I would say across the grades, go ahead and add that as part of registration. I like that.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
No, I just agreed. I think it's a good idea to have it at all grade levels, not just high school, but have the list still available for anyone who wants to review, just not necessarily returning the permission slip if not necessary.
So it'd be an opt-out procedure at the beginning of the year, list available for all 5, same procedure. No, okay, I have that down. Oh, so much better, thank you. So much better, thank you. The other thing is there's also the question about what is actually on that permission slip, because right now we have a lot of transparency, it's quite dense. Would it be of interest to the committee to have us have the department and the teachers work on what that permission slip really looks like? Because it's quite, there's some argument that is quite a lot of information, but that is something that I just want a temperature check on now. And you don't actually have to, we don't have to make a decision today, but it might be something that we would consider re-stylizing that permission slip so that it really captures what parents need to know in terms of not just those filters, but also the totality of the books and why they're being used instructionally.
I think it's reasonable to look at some other formats, but I would still, I still think it's good to keep it transparent on those filters. But if we wanted to add more context as to why certain books were in there, I think that
Okay.
I know that's making them longer, right? Are we making them longer by doing that?
Well, I do have a real question that is coming from our staff. So sometimes the profane words or the obscene words are truly, yes, they're actually in there factually, but they also present in a certain way that over magnifies it. And then we say, oh, do we really want those words on a sheet of paper when we didn't, maybe they weren't in context of the story? Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know how else to say it, but the feedback I'm getting from true professionals in the field to say, wow, when you actually look at that and you see those words, it really magnifies and distorts that book. and it makes it less desirable for different reasons than what you would want students to and parents to consider. It's just something I'm asking about because they had asked me about that. Do we have to put the actual words on that section? That's just a question, and I think it's worthwhile to provide some thought to.
I mean, I don't think that this is any surprise that I'm in full support that the staff and the teachers can do the best that they can do. And I think also not listing those out, I agree, in context is very different than just seeing a list of swear word after swear word. Very different than in a book that's tens of thousands of words called out. I think a simple either, I don't even want to say count because I think that's an excessive thing to say count, but it's yes or no, especially for the high school levels. I do not think that it's necessary to call out every single obscene word that's listed.
Other opinions?
In my opinion is that as long as we can offer a way to offer the same information to the parents, make them aware that there are, if it's yes, no, if it's easy for them to say, to get the information, it's clear and concise, and it's not too much work for teachers, but we're still being transparent that yes, your child might be exposed to this. I am on board with whatever is the most reasonable. I like that word because we don't want to make it too difficult, but we also want to provide similar information that we do now on the permission slip.
Okay. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, could we maybe just, instead of like listing everything out, say something like frequent profanity or infrequent, like to kind of give heads up that is it just like one swear word, or is it, I think we've determined that we don't really want books that are like riddled throughout the whole text with profanity, right? I think that was discussed in our board work session. But if we could, I don't know, give a guide.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is bring your attention to very specific language around this, around profanity. And one of the districts that you have a copy of from Menominee Falls, they do a pretty clear job at treating profanity in a way that I think the committee could appreciate given the discussions you've had, where it says here the elementary grades 4K through 5, there is no profanity. And we're actually talking about thresholds, which is not what I'm talking about, but what they use is the word limited profanity for the 6-8 band. And they also say it may be considered appropriate if limited use is central to the plot, the characters, or the literacy merit of the material. So right there, you see the word limited profanity. That could be an option that we use also.
Sure.
At the secondary level, 9 through 12, they also point out that there's some profanity. So the distinction is no profanity, limited profanity, some profanity.
Right.
And it does tie nicely into the plot, the characters, or the literacy merit of the material. And as you know, the committee has discussed certain genres and certain plots, such as historically accurate materials, such as even the dystopian genre. Those are plots and types of stories that are written. And I think that broadly covers it. So I guess I'd like to hear if you think that would be something that you would support recommending forward for discussion.
I know I definitely would, because I was reading through this document as it's laid out by Menominee Falls.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear your early statement.
I really like it. I am on board with how this laid out and how you just summarized it with the no profanity versus limited profanity versus some profanity. It makes it clear, and it still achieves the result that we want, is making people aware, but they ultimately get to decide.
Yeah, I did like that that policy that you had sent over from the other school district. I thought it was laid out really well, and it addressed the profanity and sexual content, which for me, those were like the top topics that were of concern to me. So I think that I do like how it addresses that. I know the graphic violence was not mentioned in there, but it did say something about sensitive topics, right? That might be, I feel like there was something in there about.
I think that my suggestion for, even though the draft or the example policy draft that you're looking at, sorry, I'm
Yeah.
saying it wrong, but from the other district, that language, even though they're not addressing graphic violence, we could still use that template
Sure.
to create the graphic violence language also. It's a similar flavor, if you will,
Yeah.
for profanity. I
Okay.
mean, the structure could be developed around, you can use that structure.
Sure, that sounds good.
And I just want to make sure I'm clear, because the way it's laid out right now, it actually, we banned, our district is banning 5, 6, 7, 8, there are 4 bans, right? 5, 6 is one ban, 7, 8 is one ban,
Oh,
9,
sure.
10. You'll notice that this particular draft that you're looking at actually has 3 bans. And I would recommend to you that that is more developmentally appropriate in education to treat the secondary as secondary, 9, 12, and not to distinguish between the grades between 9, 10, and 11, 12. And also, we are taking the 6th grade and wrapping them around really what a true middle school would look like, rather than an intermediate school. So I just want to make sure that that is noted and supported.
Yeah, I think that, I think we're all in support of that. I think the district is moving in that direction anyway with our restructuring, right? That they would be in the same buildings potentially at some point. So I'm okay with that. Yep.
And I just want to ask you also regarding the plot and the characters, et cetera, those only 3 criteria in that language. It has to broadly, but maybe that might be the problem. We do have a lot of comments about the entire slavery content that was really through the filter that we didn't quite, we're playing it out, right? That got wiped out. You'll notice in today's several lists, the civil rights books, the books that are based in civil rights, and some characters that are real in history, written in a nonfiction storyline, inadvertently, it will not cross the line. It doesn't allow us to permit those books. So when we talk about the plot, the language of the plot, that should be broadly examined or at least defined to say that it's historically based or it is a literary genre, et cetera. Otherwise, we might find ourselves in the same kind of loop that we're trying to get off of.
Yeah. Yep, sounds good.
I also, the only other thing I wanted to ask you about, so I have a few things and I will clarify for you. The only other thing that, we can't do everything at once, but I would like to have the committee bring forward very specific recommendations, which we're formulating right now. The other one is, right now as it stands, our teachers, the C&I department is front loading so much. And we really, as you can see in this policy that was from this other district, it does really delegate this responsibility to our teachers and our instructional experts and our department. And I would like to gain confidence enough to shift back to that, especially if we have more clear guideposts. So I think that is a natural effect, but I want to be very clear that we would not maintain the level of vetting that we would if our teachers could understand these guideposts, which I think this policy language would allow them to be more successful. And honestly, the sexual content is written in a way that I think is a little bit challenging to navigate, but we can try to make it more user-friendly, but the ideas are really well set there.
I mean, yeah, I think if we have, you know, some clearer language, like you were saying, and the permission slips and everything like that, I think that, I mean, ultimately, we probably don't all want to be going through huge, long lists of books constantly, right? So, I don't know, what do you think? Is that something, I mean, that would have to go to the whole board, right, to vote on that and to determine if that's,
Okay, thank you for that. And what I have in my notes right now, and I will make sure that it's written clearly and represents your thoughts, is that we would, so the idea is to propose the recommendation from the committee that we have 512 book lists available with information on there to all parents. They have an option. Transparency is key. We'll hold that up high, but they will have an option in 512 for every parent to opt out of having to provide permission. That means they are allowing full choice for their students, and they won't have to be needing to return them. And that can be done systemically in the registration process. There is some contemplation about what the format looks like. So the committee will ask us to ask the department to make some proposals, but format changes might be simplified, but still transparent, okay? Also, when we talk about the format specifically, if you would be introducing a recommendation to use that other language from the other district around levels such as none, such as some, such as little, you know, that kind of thing, to include plot and context and maybe even a yes/no version. So that's all going to be discussed, but I'm just writing it to be very, very clear what we're asking the full board to consider. And lastly, I think that's it for concretes. That's it for concretes. Is that enough?
yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I will draft that up and I will send it over and then it will make the next board's meeting to Melanie, to Ms. Aragot. Does that sound good?
Yeah, to report to the full board. Yes.
Thank you. And I know that there will be more to recommend, but I think this is a really wonderful start to make solid recommendations to the board for discussion. Thank you.
All right, so if there are no further questions, we'll move on to our next item, which is the Q4 book club lists. And let's see, will that be you,
Okay.
Quinn?
Yes, I will begin. I will just start, I will go down the line. I will highlight the things that really, after 4 quarters of the process, things that are observable and things that are happening that people might not see, just so that we can have a really full understanding of the process and its outcomes. So the 5th grade, you'll see here, there's many NAs age appropriate book choices here. One thing that is inconsistent, I just want to bring it out because it's to be transparent, is breadcrumbs, the book breadcrumbs. You'll see that there is an exceeds. And I think if I recall, because there's been many discussions for many books over many months now, I believe if I were to stick to our process, that exceeds would have been crossed off. But I do want to make a note that this is really a description of leaves and just imaginative conflict, and it's not between people. So I just I just want you to know that that's what that's at. That's where that's at. And so that's why it was exceeding, because it was graphic, was violent. It was between, what we consider living organisms, but not humans.
Thank you.
So that's what I'll point out about this list.
I didn't really see anything that stood out to me as any problem with the fifth grade list. I don't know. Does anybody else have any comments or questions on fifth?
I don't have any concerns about this list. No.
All right, nobody has
Thank you.
concerns.
Then we'll move, so I'll go on that one. I will move to the 7th grade list. Any comments on this list from members?
I think the 7th grade list is very long. There are lots of choices on that list. I like that there's lots of choices with NAs all across the board. There isn't anything that stands out to me as overly concerning with this list.
So one of the things I'll point out, oops, sorry, June, Ms. Kruger, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to agree with Melanie. No
I didn't hear you.
I have no concerns on this list.
Okay, so I wanted you to, this will be the first list and there'll be the other ones coming tonight where it's hard to see it, but we in the profession do see it. This entire list is quite long, as you noted, but it also, these are 12-year-olds who are in the 7th grade, but the age band for the book list here that's available is really 7 through 10 for the majority of those books. So we are at a lower grade level. And what that systemically does is that really lowers the rigor for our students. We might pass the threshold, but it is lower in age level. And these are 7+ to 10+s where the majority of them fall. I just want that to be noted. It's an unintended consequence to try to get books cleared through the filters. But I will tell you that from our professional standpoint, that is not really the best practice. And I think this came up earlier in a very early discussion to say, can we just lower the grade band so that it clears the hurdle? And I again stated that that would not be the best practice. So I do believe that that's why this particular list is long and clears, because we have just lowered that age band for those book titles. And I won't say anything more about that. It's just a consequence of the process that was set up. Okay, I just want that to be noted. Okay. I'd like to move to the 8th grade list. This is a much shorter list. And I want to clarify the styling of this list because it's slightly different than what we've had before. Anytime that there is an exceeds based on the filter that was set by the board, we would cross it off. Now that we know how our flow is going and have the discussions around it. So you'll see that every single one of these that hasn't exceeds really would not have met our thresholds and would not be eligible for students. And there's several of them. And I just wanted to be very transparent about what was being considered and what was not permissible.
Okay, I'll just ask some questions here. The first one that is crossed through the Mighty Long Way. That one had an exceeds in the violence category. So is it? I had to look up. I looked up who Emmett Till was to see how he was murdered because I didn't know. But I mean, it does sound like it was not. It was a pretty brutal scene, right? But I don't know how graphic it was, just explained in the book or. But I see that I mean, it is a historical thing that happened, right? So I can see. And
Yeah, we're
and these are
running
eighth
the same-
graders, right? Eighth grade,
So we are running around that same loop because that is the issue, right?
right?
Around the historical context and the stories. And I think, Ms. Faust, if you do want to know what the exact text is for that particular graphic violence, we can pinpoint that for you if you'd like. Or, but I just want you to know that that's something of great consideration to say this is historically, this is historical nonfiction. And so it just doesn't pass.
Yeah.
Would you like Ms. Faust to give you a pinpoint on that particular text, or would you not?
If you have it handy.
All right, so the language in question for this one is quoted from the text, Till's battered and mutilated body was pulled from the Tallahatchie River a few days later. How the body had been weighed down by a 75-pound cotton gin fan attached by barbed wire. Everyone was screaming and jeering at once. Their words sounded muddled except for one, which is the N-word, repeatedly.
And that's it.
So
That one passage alone, we had to deem
Yeah.
above the threshold. And it was very questionable, but we did try to be more safe than sorry.
Yeah.
And try to minimize our interpretation of it and try to be as black and white as we could be, literally. But this one was a big challenge. I want to tell you that was not easy to determine that.
I don't have a problem with leaving this one in for eighth grade. I'm okay with keeping that one on the list for eighth grade.
I think what I'd like to, I agree that I am glad that you want to keep it. I just want to be sure that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess how do we determine, right? Because how do we keep one and not another without more clear language, right? Because I mean, to me, that if I have an eighth grader right now, and I wouldn't be offended if he read that, but maybe somebody would, but I don't know.
So if that's the passage and we have multiple interpreters, right? Like you're an interpreter, everybody here on the committee is an interpreter. I think there would be a split vote on it, honestly, if that's crossing the threshold. You can see how challenging it is.
Right.
But it is a very singular passage in the entire book of something that is historically, factually known to have much more. I mean, there's a lot more written about that.
Yeah.
Historically. So I just want to be very careful
Yeah.
that I don't position the committee into what has been
Like
an
picking and
accusation
choosing
that,
and how do we?
that we're overstepping. I just want to be clear about that. But you can see that passage, I mean, honestly, it was a hard vote for us to say, is it really crossing the threshold for explicit graphic violence?
Yeah.
And some of us said yes, and some of us said no. That's how hard it was.
Can I ask Jen Wimmer to pop in here? And
I don't know if my mic is still hot. There it goes. So Quinn and I have had this discussion before. It's no different than our policy committee when we hit a crossroads on something, and sometimes we take that back to the full board for discussion. So if the committee is having that much difficulty, which we know that's something right before these lists you're trying to decide and go through, you certainly could take this and we could ask for it to be placed on a board agenda. I can carry that forward for a specific consideration and speak to this book or any other. So if, again, as Dr. Trueblood's noting, you've had multiple interpretations, you want to stay within the bounds that have been set by your full board peers, you can certainly take it back there for discussion if that's what you would like.
so otherwise, to not be overstepping, we would just, if it exceeds, it just would need to be removed.
Right. So right at this point, you're saying you've got kind of an interpretation that's going both ways. So we're uncertain.
Right.
So that again, same thing we face in policy. Then I'd recommend if you would like to bring this forward for consideration in fourth quarter and not just stop it because you're uncertain, have the conversation with the full board. and bring that book forward for full discussion. And then it also might highlight for them too some of the things that the committee's been faced with
Sure.
around these selections as well.
I would love to bring it because I think that exceeds, when you read that bit of it, is very gray. So I think this one in particular, and maybe more along the way, but this one definitely would be one that I would take to the board and say, is when we created these guidelines, is this what we had in mind when we said exceeds? Because I don't know that everyone would say that this is our interpretation of it.
Yeah.
So I, thank you. So that will, this particular title and maybe some other ones as we go along
Yeah.
will be up for board discussion to be eligible for fourth quarter, correct?
Yes, let's do that.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think for Moneyball, that one, it's just for the language. Is it, we probably don't like have a count of how many swears are in
It's a
there.
lot, it's a lot, but
Lot.
the plot is we're talking about baseball people and we're
Right.
talking about lots of money. And we're talking about the inner workings of how, how managers, how teams make their, pay and get the best athletes. I mean, it's a whole world that we are fairly familiar with. It's just getting into their cultural language and their mindsets. That's what this book's about.
I know when I was kind of looking this one up too, and I didn't find much on the book, but I know there's a movie, but the movie's rated PG-13, and that would be, most eighth graders, I think, would be 13, right?
And I can see this one being high interest to eighth grade boys. And I think that's a struggle sometimes to find that niche of books for those. So if we're going to make a list, I'm not
let's put it
totally
on there.
opposed to this one going to the full
a
board.
list.
Make a list.
So would this fall in the same category as the first title then, to say, let's bring it up?
Yep, let's bring
Because
it
it
up.
does exceed in humanity in terms of, I mean, it's a lot of cussing because that's the world they're living in and that's how they express themselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. Is there one more on here? All right, and then what about the Spies of the Mississippi? Is that probably a similar excerpt to the first one that we discussed? There's a
Ms.
student.
Faust, are you able to describe that one? Because I'm looking at that and it is a civil rights plot.
Yep. So the content that we highlighted says, as Medgar Evers walked toward the front door, the gunman in the shadows squeezed the trigger. The bullet ripped through Evers' back below his right shoulder blade. As Evers crawled to his front porch with blood pouring from his body and his keys still in his hand, Merle ran out, horrified.
Yeah, put it on the list.
All right, I have that. Thank you.
Yep.
And I think that concludes all of the exceeds titles, correct?
Right. And I know, let's see what's going on. I know like the Anne Frank one too, there's some sexual stuff in there, but that would be all stuff that if we aligned it with our human growth and development curriculum, they would already know that information, correct? And if it's, disclosed on the permission slip, that parents would know, and they could look it up more if they wanted, right?
Okay.
Okay. Are we good with that one?
Yes.
Minus those few books to come forward to the board?
Yes. All right. Contextual English. This is our striving readers English. It's a very, very short list. And you can see that half of the titles are crossed off, meaning that they have exceeded some of the thresholds in at least one category. And I wanted to note here is we also have a book range of age, which is a 9+ to 14, and we would have 14-year-olds mostly in this class. It is very difficult to find books at this grade. Very, very difficult. I know people not in the industry would not believe us, but it's very difficult to find titles when we talk about this level of reader for not only good books, quality books, but some interest books, because as you get to this level, you just have, it's a harder find, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, looking at this, I would like to hear some of the experts and see if they're going to, if we'll take them to the board, because it's hard to look at this list. And the first one on the thing is ages 9+. So you have a freshman or sophomore in high school, and technically my third grader could be reading this too. Like I don't want my freshman coming home with a book that's appropriate for 9-year-olds. So I would really like to keep as many on here as possible. So I'd be curious to talk a little bit more about some of these.
Which one? Do the first one, cruise control?
Okay.
Erin?
So we highlighted 2 passages here for this one. The first one says this: last summer, these 2 bullies were picking on Sean, and I almost burned them alive. Really, I flipped out and poured gasoline all over them and then tried to set them on fire. Only my sister, Cindy, stopped me from doing it. Hey, they were picking on little messed up wheelchair idiot Sean. These 2 wads were flicking a Bic lighter right under Sean's chin and laughing at him. So that's the first passage. Second one is, my baddest fights actually happened in my dreams. A lot of the times it's my dad and me going at it, and he's tough and tall and stronger than he is in real life, and he's hurting me. But finally, I always get the upper hand on my old man, and as I'm pounding him, he wants me to quit. But no matter how much he begs, no matter how hurt he is, I can't seem to stop. These dreams are nightmares, really. Sometimes I've got blood all over my hands, and my dad's face is shredded. It's always ugly and messy and horrible.
In Melanie's words, put it on the list.
Thank you. For the next, Stuck in Neutral would be the next book here to consider.
Gotta find my notes.
Thank you for having these too. This is really helpful.
There's just lots of notes. I have to- This quote is, a flashback to an attack on Sean by 2 random men. They call him Roller Derby, Ricky Ritardo Montalban. They threatened to slap him, then hold a lighter under his chin. A moment later, I felt a warm sensation under my chin. It turned from warm to very hot quickly. My brainstem started twitching me around. I heard them both laugh. Can you say Bic lighter? That was the last word the voice said. And I'm just curious. That's the end of that quote, but I want to do a little bit more looking at that just momentarily. There's a very much overlap between those last 2 stories. You're right.
Is it the same characters?
Correct.
Okay.
One is the sequel and one is the prequel. So I've read a lot of books. I apologize. A lot of reviews. So one is the incident, and then one is the brother reliving the incident. That is where that is coming from. Okay, this is the rest of the quote then. That was the last word the voice said. I managed to catch only a glimpse of Paul as he came at them from around the corner. He moved so fast that he was just a blur. Their bodies seemed to explode when he hit them. I heard a muffled cry from one of the strangers and a huge gasp from the other. For the next minute, the world filled with the sounds of fists hammering into flesh. Within a matter of seconds, I heard only the whimpering of one of the strangers, complete silence from the other. The bigger guy did not move at all, just lay face down in a puddle of blood. It looked like he'd been shot in the face. I thought he might be dead. The smaller guy looked even bloodier than his friend did. His left nostril looked torn open. One of his eyebrows looked half torn off too, and his nose looked flattened, his eyes bloodshot. He was terrified. The worst sight of all was Paul. He looked like a machine pounding away at the guy still standing, turning away from him only long enough to kick and stomp the unconscious guy who lay motionless on the ground. I'd never seen such an expression on Paul's face before.
Definitely a little more graphic on that one. I don't know if that would pass at the whole board level. Or, I don't know.
Can I comment?
Yes.
So one of the things that I think is really important, especially in this contextual English class, is that when there is a book that is by the same author and they're reading one book, it really does, and they're enjoying it, it really does encourage them to read the next book. And so especially at this level where students are sometimes reluctant readers, I would just add that as a note to think about.
I mean, I guess we could always bring it to the board, and then everyone can vote on it at that point.
That works for me.
We're going to drag the rest of the board into this discussion.
So that will be added.
Yeah.
And I think we have one
One more.
Woods runner.
So there's a couple different quotes for this one. So on the second swing, he found the first body. He had been scalped, mutilated. That's the extent of that quote, just that it happened. Both of the men had fresh scalps hanging on the shafts they carried. For the first time in his life, Samuel wanted to kill a man. Next quote, without thinking, his rifle at his hip, he touched the hair trigger, and in slow motion, he felt the rifle buck, saw the small hole appear in the Indian's chest. He watched the Indian fall as he saw the other Indian swing a tomahawk in a wide arc. He knew he couldn't raise his rifle in time. The tomahawk was coming at his head, and he tried to duck, but the white-hot pain exploded as the side of the tomahawk smashed into his forehead. And then the last quote is, Caleb wasn't armed, though he raised his arm and pointed at the soldier. He and Ma were immediately gunned down. Then 4 soldiers jumped to the porch and bayoneted them. Those are the 4 quotes for that one.
I just want to say that although that doesn't appeal to me, I think there probably would be some children who might be interested in reading that. So I don't necessarily think that would need to be ruled out, but sounds like another board discussion item.
And I do want to point out this book too, one of the age recommendations is 9 years old. The other age recommendation is 12 years old. So again, these are short little snippets from the larger context of it. So I will put it on the list, as will Dr. Trueblood, if that's what you would like.
I think we have to with that one, especially considering it's historical fiction. I think it's better to bring forward to everyone.
I have one question before we move away from this book list. I see that it's for contextual English book club. So is that, I'm not familiar with what that means. It sounded like this would be for students who might be struggling reading.
They're in special education. Yep.
So we have one final book list to go through, and that would be English 1. It is a very,
When we can't hear you if you're talking to us at the moment.
She's not talking, but I think your volume went out, Quinn.
I don't know what happened.
There,
Okay.
nope, now we can hear you.
You're there.
We have a final list, English 1.
This is the list that started this whole process.
Is that
Going to
right?
say that, and it actually really doesn't look different to me. This one I do have some problems with this one.
It is a coming of age, I think, which frames it up. It is a coming of age. So when you look at that umbrella that it's under, so please share your thoughts.
Well, there's a lot that exceed, and there is nothing that like hits the NA in all the categories. So then, it doesn't leave a lot of options for people that may not want all the profanity and sexual content and the violence, That's my struggle with this
Absolutely.
list. It was like this originally too. I remember it was like more than half of it. I was like, ugh. For me.
Yeah, so I apologize. What I should have said was this is the only list that doesn't have NAs across the board. It is a function of the coming of age for that developmental group, So the only way to not have this look the same as it was before is to not have coming of age novels, because that's really part of what coming of age is for adolescents. So I don't know how to untangle that, but they are put together that way. So that kind of slightly just starts to show the complication or the complexity of this type of literature.
Would there be an option for a student that, maybe they didn't want to read any of these books, or their parents were like, oh, these are just not
We actually
appropriate
do
for our
have-
family?
We do have only one, but it's important. We do have one parent who said, I don't want any of these books. And so the guidance I gave was to definitely take the child to a public library, and they can pick their books out together, and that would be sufficient for the instructional piece.
Okay.
So that was one way to manage that in a way that was helpful to the parent too.
Well, I don't know, do we want to? I feel like I don't even know what to do with this list. This is too much for me, this one, and I want to cross all of it out. So I'm
So I'll
just gonna.
tell you what will happen. I'll tell you what happens. They're crossed off right now, the remainder right there. What it would mean practically, we've had to do this with a limited list, with a number of books that we have available, that copies we have available for so many students. We have had to hurry up and buy multiple copies of permissible books. That is at expense, not a complaint. It's just a fact. And then we've had to rush order them, and we've had to make sure that they're on site for our teachers to give to their students as they choose. So that's actually what happens when you have a very, very narrow list, and then it gets more narrow. And so we still have to teach. And so that's what we do on the back end.
Yeah.
I think at this stage it's perfectly fine for the community to say, we don't know what to do with it. It may be more of an advantage to let it lie the way it is, because we don't have the work that we have before us to move into the other policy language changes that would make us look at this list differently. It's the same rules with the same list with the same outcome.
So we would just remove the exceed category ones and then keep just the others that are not crossed through, potentially?
Yeah, that's what, unless you wanted to pull for the other books, that's what we would have to do, is just eliminate all those cross off, have a very short list, and execute based on that. that's a consequence. That's what really happens.
And the book Speak, it's marked NA in the sexual, or what is, where it was the top, sexual content category, but it is about a girl that is sexually assaulted. So I would say that there is sexual content in there. But that was marked NA on here.
We moved
Sorry,
it to
which
the,
book?
we moved, it's for Speak, we moved the sexual content to the graphic violence because it is about an assault, which is considered graphic violence rather than sexual content.
But it is
There was a
sexual, so-
distinction made.
I would like to, going back to some of the other lists that we have reviewed, if you have the gutless exceeds under violence, do you have that available?
So this is the gutless graphic violence. Stop it, I yelled, and the biggest guy grabbed me, kicked my legs out from under me, wrestled me to the ground, and shoved my face down onto the concrete floor. Then he stuck his knee in my back to keep it there. I couldn't move, but I could still see. A second guy pushed Richie hard, hurling him back across the shed. Leave him alone, I choked out, and then a gloved hand shoved a rag in my mouth, a rag that smelled like glue, and I was gasping for air as they pushed Richie again and again, taking turns. They didn't speak. Not one of them said a word, but they laughed, a growing laugh, a hyena's laugh. Richie tried to fight back, but he could never get his balance. After about a dozen shoves, he fell, and then they circled around him and kicked at his stomach. He pulled his legs to his chest and covered his head, but they still kicked. They still laughed. Finally, they stopped. They stood over him, all three breathing heavily, tense. The guy pinning me down moved his knee and relaxed his hand. I spit the rag out of my mouth, rolled over, and gulped for air. I tried to stand, but now another guy's foot was against my chest, pressing me down to the floor. His eyes darted this way and that. Then, on some invisible signal, they took off, all of them, scrambling to get out of the shed, up the driveway, and into the street. The SUV started up, and the tires squealed, and they were gone.
I don't think that sounded too, what am I trying to say? I would question that as well. Yeah.
Thank you. That's how hard it was for us too.
I would for sure say that I would be in favor of removing Eleanor and Park and All American Boys, just due to the excessive language and exceeding in two categories, both of those. And then the gut list we want to put on the list to bring to the board. Okay.
Does that conclude the discussion?
Yeah, I think so. And then the other ones, are we just gonna pull them off for now? The On the Come Up and Dear Martin? Or do we want to?
I struggle when it's the exceeds language. Because again, that exceeds is such a hard,
I can tell you Dear Martin has like over 150 swear words, or I'm sorry, 115 swear words. I looked that one up. I didn't look up all of them because I was just like, I don't even want to go through all these books again. I did this last year. But I remember, yeah.
So So I would just add that the struggle is real about the word exceeds. It's not as descriptive as what we saw in the other policy from another district to say, is it limited or is it some or is it none? That probably is more helpful in the long run. So I think we're moving in that direction. That we would question, that we would actually not use that word exceeds is just what was used to help delineate a line. But now we see the consequence of it, and it's not as effective as we want it to be. So I would make a note that we would not use exceeds and develop something with the board where we would have levels of description of it.
Yep, sounds good. I think we definitely need a little more guidance from the full board for some of these descriptions.
I agree. I think we need more input on these because, like, yes, that's the swear word count, but I just looked up how many words are in it. There's over 50,000 words. And I think when you're talking about, 0.2% of the entire book, are you going to have 14 and 15-year-olds that focus on those words instead of reading the rest of them? I don't know.
And I would add that counting can get us into a bit of a place that we don't intend to land in. Contextual language is probably more of the place you want to land in, but I understand why counting would be like the first order. It's easier, but it's actually not easier in the long run.
Agree.
Because I'll tell you, our department actually said it's 30%, it's 15%, it's 7%. We did the same math that you did, Ms. Lang. And then we thought, what are we doing? We don't have those percentages, but we had to use that to help us kind of orient ourselves. But if we talk about Moneyball as an example, that's just a bunch of people swearing because that's the culture of that world. And it is specific to that group of people. We call that the subculture. And so it's just more complex than counting.
So do we want to bring those two before the board, or do we want to remove? What do you?
I would be comfortable taking it to the board since we already have a list of those being reviewed. I don't see why adding a few more for a few more opinions and thoughts on this. And in the meantime, too, do more research on some of these that we can talk to them ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just for clarity, which ones are we bringing to the board for English 1?
Dear Martin, Gutless,
Is it on the come up?
yes, thank you.
Yep. Yep. All right. Do you need any more clarification on any of this, Quinn?
No, we've accomplished a lot. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So, looks like we've reached the end of our planned agenda. If there's no further questions or comments, I would make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, June. All in favor? Aye. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.